My relationship with Clara, my wife, had been falling apart for months. What once felt like a solid partnership, full of love and companionship, now seemed like a monotonous routine. It was as if we were together out of convenience, or perhaps out of fear of facing the truth. Each day, the sense that something was terribly wrong grew stronger. The arguments, which had once been rare, became part of our daily routine. Intimacy vanished, replaced by an emotional distance that was impossible to ignore. Clara was no longer the woman I had fallen in love with. For a long time, I tried convincing myself it was just a rough patch, something all marriages go through. But with each passing day, it became harder to deny the truth. Clara had changed, and I was no longer a part of her future. Her behavior turned mysterious. She frequently left the house with flimsy excuses that didn't add up. Her outings became more frequent, and her explanations grew more unbelievable. My intuition told me something deeper was happening, but I still clung to hope that we could fix things. Reality soon forced its way in. Clara was either cheating on me or had completely given up on our marriage. It was the beginning of the end, and I knew it wouldn't be long before everything came to light. In the days leading up to the breaking point, the clues started to pile up. Clara came home late, claiming she had work meetings, but never explained why she needed to be so dressed up for them. Her excuses didn't make sense anymore, and her actions left me questioning everything. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. The house was eerily quiet. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I found Clara standing in front of the mirror, carefully applying makeup. She was wearing a stunning black dress, one I had never seen before. My gut told me something was very wrong. "Are we going somewhere?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "No, I am," she replied, her voice shockingly calm. "I have a date." For a moment, I stood frozen. My mind struggled to process her words. "Who are you going out with, Clara?" I asked, trying to keep my composure. She shrugged nonchalantly. "It doesn't matter. You can leave now and avoid the drama, or stay and ruin everything once and for all." Her tone carried no remorse, no guilt, just cold indifference. At that moment, I realized there was no saving our marriage. The confrontation had begun, and I was about to see how far Clara was willing to go to destroy everything we had built together. After admitting she was meeting another man, Clara didn't stop there. She seemed to want me to explode, to lose my temper. But I stayed calm. "You're not going anywhere," I said firmly. Clara laughed coldly. "Oh yes, I am," she replied, her voice icy. Picking up her phone, she looked me straight in the eye and threatened, "If you try to stop me, I'll call the police. I'll tell them you assaulted me. They'll arrest you for 48 hours, and I'll have the house to myself." It was then I realized how far she was willing to go. The woman I had once loved was now someone entirely different. She was using every weapon at her disposal to gain control. But I wasn't going to fold under her threats. "Do what you want, Clara," I said calmly, watching her start to dial. My composed reaction caught her off guard. She had expected anger, but I had already accepted what was happening. I was ready to face the consequences, even if they involved the lies she might tell the police. While Clara busied herself preparing for her so-called perfect date, I decided to act. I went to the garage and disabled the garage door opener. Then I sabotaged her car, just enough to ensure she wouldn't be going anywhere that night. As I walked back into the house, I passed the living room table and noticed her purse sitting open. A pack of condoms inside caught my eye. The truth was undeniable now. Clara hadn't just planned to betray our marriage. She had done so with boldness and without a shred of remorse. Holding the pack for a moment, I felt a mix of anger and disdain before putting it back. It wasn't long before Clara realized something was wrong. The sound of her hurried footsteps echoed through the house as she rushed to the garage. Moments later, she stormed back into the house, her face twisted in pure fury. Her eyes burned with hatred as she glared at me. "What did you do to my car?" Clara shouted, her voice filled with frustration. I remained calm, sipping my coffee as I replied, "Maybe it's broken." Clara glared at me, knowing I was involved, but she had no proof. Her carefully laid plan was falling apart before her eyes, and all she could do was hurl baseless accusations. Running out of options, Clara resorted to her final threat. She called the police, hoping her false story would be enough to incriminate me and give her an escape. When the officers arrived, I was ready. I knew Clara would do anything to make me look like the villain, so I had taken precautions. Before the situation exploded, I had already started recording everything on my phone. 2 young officers entered the house, and to my surprise, I recognized one of them from school. Clara, always dramatic, began her performance, accusing me of preventing her from leaving and claiming I had threatened her. The officer looked at me, clearly skeptical of her story. Before he could even question me, I calmly showed him the recordings on my phone. Clara's face turned pale as the officers watched the videos, which proved I hadn't threatened her at any point. The evidence was clear. She had lied to incriminate me. One officer turned to Clara and said, "It seems you haven't been honest with us." Clara stammered, trying to explain herself, but the damage was done. Her lies were exposed, and the officers quickly realized it was nothing more than a desperate attempt to manipulate the situation. The officers suggested I seek a restraining order against Clara to protect myself from future attempts at manipulation. I agreed, determined to ensure she couldn't threaten or control me anymore. But Clara wasn't ready to give up. After the police left, she made one last desperate attempt to escape. With her car unusable due to my earlier sabotage, she tried to take mine. What Clara didn't realize was that I had already disabled the garage door opener and hidden the keys. The sound of my car accelerating toward the garage door echoed through the house. The impact was loud enough to damage the vehicle, leaving Clara in a state of pure rage. She stormed out of the car, her face red with fury, but as she looked at me, something shifted. She realized I wasn't going to give in. At that moment, Clara saw her plan had completely failed. Her desperation had only made things worse, and the truth of her betrayal was now undeniable. Her anger gave way to genuine despair. She paced back and forth, muttering to herself, trying to find a way to reverse what she had done. Finally, she looked at me with pleading eyes. "Martin, what do you want from me? Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice trembling. I stayed calm and firm. "I'm not the villain here, Clara. You betrayed me, and now you have to face the consequences of your actions." She tried to justify herself. "I just felt lonely," she whispered, as if that could explain everything. Her usual emotional manipulation had no effect on me anymore. I looked at her and said, "This isn't about what you felt. It's about what you did to me, to us." For the first time, Clara seemed to grasp the reality of her actions. Her face turned pale as I pulled out my phone and showed her the evidence I had gathered, messages, photos, hotel records, and even conversations between her and her lover, mocking me behind my back. Her voice broke as she tried to defend herself. "You don't understand, Martin. It wasn't serious. It didn't mean anything. It was just a distraction." Her excuses only deepened my disgust. "It doesn't matter what it meant to you," I replied coldly. "It's about what you did. You destroyed our marriage." Clara finally broke down. "Yes, I cheated on you," she admitted, her voice barely audible. For the first time that night, her tears seemed genuine. But it was too late. My heart, once filled with love for her, had hardened. Her betrayal had killed any compassion or forgiveness I might have had. "Martin, I know I made a mistake, but can we fix this? I got lost along the way. Can we try again?" she begged, her voice filled with desperation. I shook my head. "Clara, this is over. You chose to betray me, and now you have to live with that choice." Her eyes filled with tears as she pleaded, "Please, Martin, give me one more chance. I can change, I promise. In the past, I might have relented, but now I knew better. The trust, the love, everything we had built was gone. "Clara, you had your chances," I said firmly. "You chose this path, and now there's no going back." She fell silent, realizing there was nothing more she could say to change my decision. Her desperate attempts to escape the consequences had failed, and now she had to face the reality of what she had done. "This is over," I said one last time. Putting a definitive end to our story, I decided I couldn't spend another night under the same roof as Clara. The house we had shared for so many years, once filled with love and memories, now felt suffocating. I needed space and clarity, and I knew I wouldn't find it by staying there. Grabbing my keys, a backpack with a few essentials, I left without looking back. Clara followed me to the door, pleading, "Don't do this, Martin. Let's work this out together." Her words didn't move me. There was nothing left for her to say or do to change my decision. I was determined. I drove aimlessly for a while, trying to process everything that had happened. Eventually, I stopped at a simple hotel, rented a room for the night, and lay on the bed staring at the ceiling. The reality of my life changing so drastically hit me hard. Divorce felt inevitable, but it was still painful to accept that the marriage which once brought me happiness was now just a bitter memory. The first hours away from home were lonely, but also liberating. The weight of Clara's betrayal still hung over me, but I knew that with time, the wounds would heal. The next morning, I made my way to a divorce attorney's office. I knew I couldn't waste time. Clara had proven she wouldn't give up easily, and I needed legal protection, especially after her threats to falsely accuse me of assault. When I met with my lawyer, I told him everything, from the first signs of her betrayal to the night she threatened me. He listened carefully, took notes, and suggested we immediately begin divorce proceedings and secure a restraining order. With all the evidence I had, messages, recordings, and Clara's confession, he was confident I had the upper hand. "She may try to manipulate the situation," he warned, "but the evidence is on your side." I knew the process wouldn't be quick, but I was ready to face it. Clara, however, wasn't ready to let go. She began bombarding me with calls and messages. At first, they were remorseful, begging for forgiveness and a chance to make things right. But when I ignored her attempts to contact me, the tone of her messages shifted. Remorse turned into accusations and veiled threats. One message read, "If you continue with this, you'll regret it." Her manipulative nature was once again on full display, but it only reinforced my resolve. I blocked her number, leaving all communication to be handled through our lawyers. Friends began telling me that Clara was becoming increasingly unstable. She was struggling to cope with the reality of losing control. Finally, the day of the court hearing arrived. Clara had hired an aggressive lawyer who tried to discredit my evidence, arguing that the messages and recordings were obtained improperly. Fortunately, my lawyer was well prepared. Everything had been obtained legally, and the judge allowed the evidence to be presented. Clara's testimony was filled with emotional manipulation. She portrayed herself as a victim, a confused woman who had made mistakes but still loved her husband. "I was lost," she said with teary eyes. "I never wanted it to end this way. Martin and I had a beautiful life together. I just want a chance to fix things." But her words no longer had power over me. They felt hollow, a last-ditch effort to avoid the inevitable. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke clearly and calmly about the betrayal, the lies, and the manipulation. I presented my evidence and recounted the night she threatened me with false accusations. The judge listened carefully, and I could see from his expression that the truth was clear. After days of arguments and testimonies, the verdict was delivered. The court ruled in my favor. The divorce was granted, and Clara was ordered to cover part of the legal expenses. As Clara left the courtroom defeated, I felt a sense of immense relief. For years, I had been trapped in a relationship filled with manipulation and betrayal. Now, I was free. The divorce marked the beginning of a new chapter. I reorganized my life, rediscovered who I was, and started focusing on what truly mattered, myself and the people who genuinely cared about me. In the months that followed, the feeling of freedom grew stronger. There were no more messages from Clara, no threats, no manipulations. I was finally able to move forward without the weight of the past dragging me down. Though the process had been painful, it was also liberating. I had closed one chapter of my life to make room for something better. I didn't know what the future held, but I was ready to embrace it with open arms. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace, free from the emotional prison that had held me captive for so many years.